This bullying from the person who is supposed to be leading people who are sworn to protect us, it is unconscionable.
Strong words today from victim advocacy groups that accuse the county's top cop of mishandling assault accusations against him. And word of an investigation into John Urquhart could shake up the race for King County Sheriff just 6 days before ballots are due. Today, the Renton Police Department confirms it is investigating Sheriff Urquhart for alleged sexual assault.
King 5's Elisa Hahn has been working on this story for several weeks now and joins us with what she's learned. Elisa.
Lori and Mark, the man making the allegation is a former deputy who worked for the sheriff's office for 9 years and is now a police officer out of state. Brian Barnes is allowing us to identify him for the story. The sheriff insists Barnes is a disgruntled employee with an axe to grind and that the accusation is politically motivated.
He was once a well-known storefront deputy in Skyway. We interviewed him for several stories.
Hey, I'm Deputy Barnes. I'm with the Sheriff's Office. Do you live here?
On social media, residents and even the sheriff praised Deputy Brian Barnes for his strong connections with the community. He received 15 commendations for his work. Barnes spoke out on public safety issues and made sure victims were remembered, like in this story 3 years ago.
He was mistaken for a gang member, and he was 12 years old and just coming home with his cleats.
But now the former deputy claims he was the victim of sexual misconduct. The department's leader, Sheriff John Urquhart, the alleged perpetrator. Barnes says it happened in March of 2014 outside the Yankee Grill in Renton. This is where he and Sheriff John Urquhart had dinner together.
Why were you having dinner with him the night in question?
I didn't want him to resign from his storefront position because he did a good job as a storefront deputy, and I needed him there.
After the two left the restaurant, the former deputy claims they were talking in the parking lot when Urquhart tried to grope him. Barnes says he immediately pulled away. The sheriff calls it a despicable lie meant to derail his bid for re-election.
And any allegation that something happened is just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. Period. It's ridiculous. That's the only way I could describe it. And any allegation that is made is purely political.
A year later, the deputy resigned from the department. Then in May of this year, Barnes says he finally reported the incident in this email to the Department of Justice. After dinner in the parking lot, he wrote, the sheriff put his arm around my shoulder with one hand and grabbed my crotch with his other hand. I pushed him away but was stunned by his actions. The DOJ declined to comment or confirm the email. When he didn't hear back from the feds, the 49-year-old officer contacted the sheriff's office Internal Investigations Unit in September. The IIU referred the case to Renton Police. The sheriff went in for questioning in mid-October. In our meeting with Urquhart, he gave us this binder, information he also shared with Renton detectives. Inside hundreds of pages, the sheriff says, that serve as evidence Barnes is a contentious employee with a long list of mostly unfounded complaints made against other law enforcement top brass. And to refute the deputy's allegations, Urquhart's chief of staff showed us a text message Barnes sent about the sheriff after their meeting the night in question. He is a good man, Barnes wrote. I told you I would never badmouth someone I believe in. This is the second time a former deputy has accused Urquhart of sexual assault. The first allegation came from a woman who said he raped her in 2002 when he was her supervising sergeant, a claim largely discredited by federal and local investigators. But this year, the King County Ombudsman Office issued a report saying Urquhart violated procedures for telling his own Internal Investigations Unit not to investigate or document the rape accusation.
The mishandling of sexual assault charges against Sheriff Urquhart is appalling and absolutely unacceptable.
Today, 3 women's rights groups came out publicly against the sheriff. Monisha Harrell of Equal Rights Washington said she was appalled how Urquhart and his staff tried to discredit his accusers.
It is absolutely victim blaming. We have to get past the point where we expect people to be perfect.
Whatever happened the night with this new accuser, there were signs that the relationship between Barnes and the sheriff began to sour. 4 months after the alleged incident, in a King 5 story, Urquhart told us Deputy Barnes was stepping down from his Skyway position because his work hours changed.
He was on a 410 shift, and a 410 shift is sometimes problematic, it's more expensive, but the big reason he was changed is because of all the problems that we're having up here.
But Barnes hinted he had other reasons.
It wasn't done for a budgetary reason. There's internal conflict in the sheriff's office.
A year later, facing termination for insubordination, conduct unbecoming an officer, and making false reports, Barnes resigned, but with a substantial payout. Urquhart says he wanted to get rid of a narcissistic and litigious employee and offered him more than $100,000 to leave.
Why settle with someone who was facing termination, especially with more than $100,000?
That's kind of the way government works. We didn't have a particularly strong case, we were told. We were in mediation, and the mediator told us we didn't have a particularly strong case. So King County, not the sheriff's office, King County negotiated with him to get him to resign. And I concurred with that. I thought that was a good decision.
The deputy says he accepted it, fearing he could lose his house and his reputation. Both sides say the sexual allegation never came up in the negotiations for his departure. Why did Barnes wait more than 3 years to come forward with the allegation? As a cop, I always wondered why people waited to report sex crimes, he said in a written statement. I learned through experience how hard it is internally to believe someone would violate someone and not care. The public paid me to leave so John could continue to be sheriff, and an agreement for me to be silent.
This particular case is nothing more than a political stunt coordinated with my opponent. That's exactly what this is. Nothing more than that.
Urquhart's opponent, Major Mitzi Johanknecht, denies having anything to do with the allegation. On top of all of this, the former female deputy who accused him of rape back in 2002 has filed a sexual assault protection order against Urquhart to keep him from sharing her personal medical file. Urquhart and his staff vehemently deny the woman's allegations. Her request for the protection order is scheduled to be heard by a judge on Tuesday, and we all know that's Election Day.
Wow.
So, Elisa, what do we make of the timing of the Barnes accusation?
You can't ignore the timing of all of this coming out, right? It's just before the election. Urquhart points out that Barnes made the accusation on September 12th, right after the county notified him of an overpayment on that settlement by $26,000, an amount that Barnes now has to repay. September 12th is also the day that Mayor Ed Murray resigned from office because of sexual assault claims. Barnes said neither were factors in his decision to step forward. He insists the county notified him of the overpayment back in February, and now that he lives on the East Coast, he says he pays little attention to the politics here in Seattle.
Wow. All right, Elisa, thank you.